Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 180, which is called Mugino, it's called The Assassin Mugino. And yeah, as the episode would suggest, as the preview from last week told us, this was going to be a Mugino character episode, and that's exactly what it was. We got a pretty deep insight into the character, including pretty much, I suppose, the core of his, full backstory. And there was a lot of just, I think, great moments throughout this episode in terms of foreshadowing and setup. Stuff that the manga doesn't necessarily have the time to do, but that is really going to pay off quite well in the anime as, not next week, but the week afterwards, because I think we have a break week coming up next week. But then we'll be back in with 181 being the first episode of the manga arc coming up. So all this setup work that we've done is going to really make, I think, a lot of the key points here hit home quite hard. So yeah, that's what I suppose we kind of need to talk about here, a lot of the foreshadowing elements. So Himawari working on the vase that she's going to give to Hinata for her birthday actually is a pretty important thing. Not necessarily for the upcoming arc, the AO arc, but for the arc afterwards, the vase comes into quite a lot of importance. Obviously, the core of this episode was kind of setting up Mugino is actually an important character with what's about to happen. That's cool. But also, like, right at the end, Katasuke giving Naruto the scientific ninja tool arm that he wants him to test out, and Naruto is going to use this in the sparring match that he has coming up against Boruto. So that's going to be very cool. I suppose that will probably be the opening scene of the next episode, which is going to be very, very exciting. Naruto versus Boruto in a sparring match, and Naruto is going to be using a ninja tool. That's kind of cool. And they also covered the idea of like, oh, are we still suspicious of Katasuke? We've been monitoring him, but there's no sign of the genjutsu that he was under. And they're making you maybe doubt Katasuke a little bit going into this next arc, which again is a relatively important element of it, because the next arc is going to be relatively focused on scientific ninja tools. As you would perhaps expect, given that we got the setup in the previous episodes that Ao is going to be in the arc, and Katasuke was the one who gave Ao his prosthetics. So that's all going to sort of come around in really nicely. But the focus of this episode is Mugino and how Boruto encounters him. So when Boruto is out looking for a present for Hinata for her birthday, he encounters Mugino seemingly chasing after someone, and he thinks it's a mission, and he tries to help him. But it's actually Mugino running away from the owners of a restaurant that he owes a lot of money to because he has a tab with them, and he runs away saying he has a mission every time he eats there. So he hasn't paid up, and it basically forces the situation where Boruto has to pay the tab for Mugino, so Boruto doesn't have any money left to buy a present for Hinata. And the details surrounding Mugino and his money is kind of like initially weird, because you're like, wait, is this just a blatant lie that he just gave all of the money he got this month to a random kid he found? But by the end of the episode, I think they do such a good job with the backstory that it makes that relatively weird kind of like thing that he said that feels like a lie feel so inherent to the character because of how well done the backstory was. So that all worked out really, really nicely, but it means that Mugino sort of owes Boruto a little bit. They gained trust between each other in sort of the last sort of larger arc that we had. Now we're seeing the sort of more emotional side of that, because by the end of the episode, Boruto is referring to Mugino like Konohamaru as Big Brother Mugino, which is meant to signify that, he is now someone Boruto trusts and respects quite a lot, and is truly one of Boruto's friends who he will look out for. So that was a major thing they accomplished here, especially with the idea being that Mugino, the only person he's really ever told his full backstory to is Boruto. and then he tasks Boruto with, like, look after my turtle that I just recently got, because again we saw that set up in the previous episodes. And he gives him, like, the key to his house to do this, of course. And so like, manga readers, of course, will get a sense for, like, oh, well, I wonder, will this sort of be an important thing for Boruto in the aftermath of this arc? Like, I think the anime is going to do, again, some of the job that the manga perhaps couldn't. Because, again, you can't underestimate how little importance is really placed on Mugino in the manga arc. Like, he's there. He does, like, one or two kind of important things, but they really don't focus on him all that much. That feels completely different now in the anime based on the setup. So I'm assuming they'll maybe make him a little bit more emphasized in the arc now that, I suppose they'll maybe extend out a few scenes to just get across Mugino's character a little bit more, which again, they couldn't really do all that much in the manga because they kind of have to focus on the main character. So Konohamaru's here, so we'll focus on him. Boruto comes in, so let's focus on him rather than the sort of side characters. But we then get to this situation where Mugino brings Boruto back to where he lives, which is just this barren room where the only really notable thing about the room is that it has a great view of the Hokage stone faces. Especially, it seems kind of central with the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. And that's actually important because one of the few possessions that Mugino actually owns is a picture of the third Hokage, as well as a letter from him. So this is sort of the core of the backstory. It's, why is the third Hokage important to Mugino? And that's what we get. So this backstory works in, I think, multiple ways. One, it helps to explain why we never saw Mugino as, like, a member of Konohamaru's generation, as we saw it in, like, Naruto Shippuden. Why we didn't see alongside a young Konohamaru and everyone else and so on, like Moegi. Why wasn't Mugino there as well? This explains that for the most part, in the sense that, Mugino wasn't, like, originally from the Hidden Leaf Village. He was from, I suppose a refugee village sort of on the outskirts, which the third Hokage went to visit one day. And he talks about how, in that era there was, like, a war going on. There was a conflict between the nations. And one of the things that happened was that kids often would be kidnapped and used to try and assassinate people. So he was used by a group to try and kill the third Hokage when he came to visit one of these refugee sites. And so he acts like the perfect, kid, I want to be a shinobi when I grow up, can I be? And Hiruzen kind of shows a liking to him. He then shows up at where Hiruzen is staying and gives him flowers, but uses this as an attempt to assassinate him. And so we're left in this interesting situation where Mugino is attempting to stab the third Hokage, but this third Hokage immediately realizes the situation here. This kid would not just on his own attempt to do this, so he must be controlled by other people. He sees a curse mark on Mugino and figures it out, that if you don't succeed in the assassination attempt, they'll kill you. They'll activate the curse mark and kill you. So he's forced, because they're being watched, into a situation where he has to let Mugino stab him. And this distracts the others on the outside enough to where Hiruzen can send his shadow clone out to, take them out. Which again, they were just two sort of random shinobi, so his shadow clone just, like judo throws both of them and they're both out of action. And it's a pretty simple action scene, but the emotion of it is meant to be that Hiruzen, because it's a child trying to kill him, harbors no sort of ill intent towards him over this, but just realizes that, him as a leader, the adults, it is their fault that something like this has happened to a child, to force them into this situation, and he will try and improve Mugino's life going forward. And so just that idea of, like, the person who literally has just stabbed him hugging him back is is a powerful moment, and obviously you can see it hits Mugino really, really hard. And so we end off with this situation where Hiruzen gives Mugino a letter signed by him that basically says that if you come to the Leaf Village, they will let you in and you can kind of become part of the village. Basically that he has an entry into the academy if he wants it. So I guess this helps to explain why, you know, he becomes friends with Konohamaru at a certain point, but that he was maybe like a bit behind in the academy itself, which perhaps is why we didn't really see him all that much. He was still maybe training and a little bit behind Konohamaru, which I suppose would help to explain why Konohamaru tends to take the lead in sort of missions involving the two. But still, that all works really well, in addition to the third Hokage mentioning that, you know, I have a grandson in or around your age. I'd love it if you could become his friend. And so right at the end we see the death of the third Hokage, and in the aftermath of it, Mugino watches Konohamaru walking out upset, and I suppose the implication is that, like, this is potentially where they meet for the first time. He goes after Konohamaru and they begin to talk and eventually become the friends that they are right now. And so this serves a few points in terms of, here is your reasoning behind why Mugino would never ask Konohamaru for money, because he respects the third Hokage, and thus the third Hokage's grandson, his like best friend, so much he could never possibly do that. It also explains why he would give away all of his money to a child, because effectively the third Hokage did sort of much the same for him. He trusted a random child that much that it had an impact on him, and he does the same going forward. That's why he doesn't really value, you know, having possessions all that much. So I guess from his point of view, he pretty much only uses his money to buy food, really. So that, you know, fits the character with, you know, how sparse his room is, basically. And yeah, after this, you know, it's a big story. It hits Boruto, and in the aftermath, like I said, he refers to Mugino as Big Brother Mugino going forward. So that's pretty cool, and I'm excited to see. I hope they do Mugino, you know, do it right in the upcoming manga arc. I'd like to see him get just a few more scenes to be emphasized a bit more than he is in the manga. That I hope it's not just that they've done all the setup work, but he still only plays the exact same role he does in the manga. I still feel he probably needs to stand out a little bit more. But I think they'll do that. I think they'll do that after all the setup work that they've done here. So yeah, that's all the setup stuff done for the arc, and I think it's all going to work really, really well. So excited to get into the next episode. Of course, we do have to wait an extra week because we're off, but we'll be back the next week with 181, which is called The Vessel, which is the name of the manga chapter. So it looks like it is in fact just going to be probably one episode per chapter. And I'm pretty sure this is the way they did the Shoujoji arc as well, where give or take a page or two, it pretty much was a chapter an episode. So that's really good to see. So there's my thoughts on the chapter or the episode. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.